Hi, I'm Samantha Lambert. I am your host for Books and Cats. These are my cats, and these are the books that we're going to be talking about today. It's the Dark Artifices series by Cassandra Clare. We're super excited to talk to you about them. This is a fantasy series that takes place 5 years after The Mortal Instruments, which is a YA novel that we all read. Again, it has romance, and it has fantasy, and war, and dying, and also Edgar Allan Poe, which is super fun. I read one of these books as a teenager, and now I'm rereading it as an adult. The book that we are going to be talking about, drumroll please, it is The Dark Artifices by Cassandra Clare. Now, I'm sure that you're thinking, oh, Samantha, that sounds familiar. Who's Cassandra Clare? That is because if you were a YA girly in between 2012 and 2017, you probably know Cassandra Clare from The Mortal Instruments. The Mortal Instruments was a phenomenon similar to like Divergent, The Hunger Games, Twilight, Harry Potter, other stuff. Oh, Vampire Academy. The Mortal Instruments ended up being turned into a TV show called Shadowhunters, but what nobody really knew, unless they were like niche nerd, was that the Infernal Devices and the Dark Artifices are both actually series that coexist with the Mortal Instruments. Cassandra Clare had 3 entire series, not just the one that everybody read. So the Infernal Devices actually ends up taking place about 150 to 200 years. That could be a total lie. It could have been 100 years before the Mortal Instruments takes place. There's some main characters in there that lead into the Mortal Instruments, and then they lead also into the Dark Artifices, and they exist in all of the 3 different series because they're all part of the same book and world. Now, the Dark Artifices, the 2 main characters, Emma Carstairs and Julian Blackthorne, are actually in the Mortal Instruments as well. They're 12 years old in the last couple of books. They're major components of the war because this whole series has a lot to do with war, if you haven't read it yet, because they're Shadowhunters, which I'll get to in a second. But Julian and Emma are actually 12 in the Mortal Instruments, so that takes place 5 years later, leads into the Dark Artifices, and so a lot of the characters from the first 2 series are actually in this one. This is fun if you have already read all the other series, because you know everything from the other series. However, it is Star Wars style, so you don't have to read one first before you do the next. You can just read one of them and be absolutely satisfied. I don't recommend reading just one book of the series. You'll be very confused and also probably hungry for more. That is to say that there is a whole world that you have had built for you. There are Shadowhunters, there are werewolves, vampires, fairy, and that is fairy, not fairy, and also there are what was I gonna say? I remember what I was going to say. They are fairy, not fae as well. They are different. All the YA girlies from back in the day, they're now ACOTAR girlies, Fourth Wing, Throne of Glass, you name it, Quicksilver, okay? Fae are so different if you have not read this series. Just want to clarify that. They're actually kind of looked down upon in the Mortal Instruments fairy, that is. They're kind of like lesser beings, sort of like Muggleborns in Harry Potter, but that's not because of like power dynamics or anything like that. It's just because they're super untrustworthy. Yeah, they are gonna lie to your face. Oops, shouldn't have said that, sorry. They can't technically lie, but they're gonna. Anyway, that's important to know because in the Mortal Instruments series, we see the Blackthorne family, of which Emma is not a part of. Emma's got her own parents. She is a Carstairs. However, she trains at the Blackthorne Institute because the Blackthorns head up that institute. So all Shadowhunters have their institute. Well, Julian's older brother Mark and his older sister Helen, they're half siblings, but they're treated like regular siblings. They're actually half fairy, half Shadowhunter. So there's a lot of politics that bleed into this. We start out with both of them being sent away. So the older siblings are not involved. Okay, which leads us to Julian also has several younger siblings. Emma is an only child, but her parents were killed in the Mortal Instruments. Her parents were murdered. Super big plot point. Not a spoiler at all. Huge, huge, huge plot point. Emma cares about revenge, and Julian, that's like what she cares about. I think there's a line in it where it says like there's only two things that she truly believes in, and that is revenge and Julian. They are best friends. They are parabatai, which means they are bonded to each other for life. That helps them fight better, makes them stronger, makes them more intrinsically linked. Emotionally, they can sense when the other is hurt or dead or anything like that. Another huge plot point is that they cannot fall in love legally. Legally, they cannot fall in love because they're parabatai, which you already know they're gonna break. Yeah, they broke it. They broke that rule. That's not a spoiler. That's like the plot. That's the plot. Anyway, so there is, I will say, there's a very, if you've already read The Mortal Instruments, there's a distinction between the writing from TID, TDA, and TMI. Those are all acronyms. The Mortal Instruments, the Infernal Devices, and the Dark Artifices. Those are what they stand for. I don't know why I told you that was self-explanatory. Anyway, so there's a very distinct way that they're all written, and while they are similar, they're also absolutely not. For instance, there is a lack of knowledge for different world building characteristics in the Mortal Instruments, because obviously Clary is not a part of that world. She's learning about it. So what makes this super interesting is in the Dark Artifices, all of the characters have been living in this world. This is what they know. Like, they don't know what it's like to be working a 9 to 5 and having to make their own dinner and paying their own rent because they live in an institute. But they do have a lot worse things that they have to do than us. For instance, die young. I'll take mine. Well, it's a draw. It's a draw. That being said, this was different for me to read because I hadn't read them before. I read The Mortal Instruments back in high school, and my sister got me into it, and then after that she got me into the Infernal Devices, and then after that, when I was in college I was definitely an adult, I reread The Mortal Instruments. And in between that, when I was a senior in high school, I read the first one of the Dark Artifices. I remember specifically sitting in Mr. A, that was my English teacher, my senior year English teacher, sitting in his classroom, and we were having like quiet reading time because we were like about to graduate and like we didn't have anything to do. So we're reading books, I'm sitting in his armchair, and there are heavy, heavy, heavy components of Edgar Allan Poe in the first Dark Artifices book. So Lady Midnight, actually, there's so much Edgar Allan Poe like content, just because there's a character called Annabel Lee. And so there's a poem called Annabel Lee, and yada, 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 and they all bleed into each other. And as I'm reading this book, I look up and I'm like, Edgar Allan Poe. And I look and I see a poster of Edgar Allan Poe's Annabel Lee poem. Wild. Wild. Anyway, didn't pick them up again. Thought about them a couple of times. Forgot a little bit, but thought about them a little bit. And then just reread them. Holy cow. Holy cow. I loved it. I loved it. Everybody's on ACOTAR and Fourth Wing and Throne of Glass and everything right now. And while I also am on those, I do feel like we should reread the books that we were reading in our YA phase, because, girl, it was a lot spicier than I remember. This fairy menage a trois was ahead of its time. It was ahead of its time. That is to say, there is a fairy throuple in this book. I'm not going to say which one. I'm not going to say who. But I do want you to know. And it's a lot spicier than the YA I remember reading. A lot spicier. A lot spicier. Cassandra Clare was ahead of her time. There is something about this series that I specifically loved. And that is that a lot of times when you're reading a book, you're like, okay, this place and that place. And it's like, Okay, this is the setting. Okay, this is where they go to school. This is where they work. This is the street they're on. It doesn't really matter. A lot of times it takes place in New York. But it was really interesting because when you dumb it down, it could be anywhere. You know, I've read books where it's like, this could be any city. I've also read books where I'm like, oh, I know that city. Oh, I used to live in that city. And then you still don't have that, like, there's a lot of like made up places. I used to read this series where they had this pizza shop in in Chicago when I lived in Chicago that sold a bacon and cream cheese pizza. And I kept looking for that pizza place and it turns out it didn't exist. But what Cassandra Clare did was actually included places that are in LA in the setting. So the Dark Artifices takes place in LA and like the surrounding LA area. And there's even, specifically a thrift shop. And I went, oh, that's pretty cool. It's like cool that they like mentioned exactly like where it is too. I Googled it, it exists. It exists. She did that with all of the set locations. They frickin' exist. They frickin' exist. And I went, oh, I should go there. And I'm going to, I haven't yet, but I'm going to. But it was really interesting to know all of these places that she's talking about, because even when I had read it the first time, I didn't know. I lived in Missouri. I was like 16. I was like 18. I don't know. Anyway, but now I know. And I can go to them if I want to. Now, I do have to say, I think this author, to be quite frank, gets a lot of hate just because one of my friends said to me, they were like, oh, Cassandra Clare, if she knows how to write one romance, she knows how to write like it all the same way. And I was like, well, I don't really know what you're talking about, because personally all of her books are super different. Like, what, a menage a trois or unrequited love triangle, like they're all different. There's nothing that's like the same. Oh, like, a pair which I love, but they weren't in love, and this one they are. So it's like, it's different. I do think that this might be the best of her series. Well, I take that back. I'm not going to say that yet. I can't say that because I like them all in different ways. However, this book for me gave fantasy, it gave war, and it gave romance, all in a little package that was only about 800 pages each. I think I'm just kidding. But there is something about this series that truly sets it apart differently, and that's that it's not really a happily ever after. Like, it is. The couple ends up together, the war ends, which you kind of already knew was going to happen. Like, a couple ends up together, another, like, a couple, like, whatever. Like, it's, you know. But there are, like, some serious deaths along the way. At one point, they go into this other world, like this other plane, if you will. They go onto another plane, of which a lot of people have already died. However, one person that has previously died is alive. If you've made it this far, you probably know that character is Libby, his younger sister. And they see her, and she's alive, and most of them are dead, and they try to bring her back, and she doesn't. She stays. She does not go back to their world with them, even though all of her family has died, and in their world, she has died. They don't make it even. And to me, that was like, oh, we're understanding of different characters and lives and plots, and she's got her own story to live, and she's got a romance in that world that was, man, he died actually. That she literally kills to like save everybody else. So it's not a happily ever after in the traditional sense. Like, people do die. This is a war. And similarly to the war in the Mortal Instruments, people die, but this time they're closer to our hearts. Also, the antagonists. This isn't really a spoiler, but the antagonists in this series, they don't really change from book 1 to 2 to 3. There's different ones. There's several different antagonists. There's sub-antagonists. There's main antagonists, and so on and so forth. And yet, it kind of traverses all the way through, and it never really changes. Kind of like in Harry Potter. Voldemort is a staple all the way through, but every time it's a different antagonist. Like that, which I found to be kind of grounding. The books bled into each other, but the story was so vast. Another thing that I thought was incredible was that, first of all, slutty little Jace Herondale. We do love Jace Herondale when he's so gone for Clary. Anyway, he proposed to her and she said no. If that's all you listened to of this entire episode, I just want you to know, if you read The Mortal Instruments, Jace proposed to Clary. She had her reasoning. However, Cassandra Clare, you dirty dog. Like, I thought that was so iconic. I read that and I was like, that's really confusing. And then you find out it's like because she thinks, like, she has like a premonition that she's gonna die, and she didn't want to marry Jace if she thought she was gonna die, because she was like, if I marry him and I die as his wife, it's going to be monumentally worse for him than if I die as his girlfriend, even though he loves her the same. Like, he loves her so much. His love is like so infinite for her that whatever. Yeah, he loved her. But anyway, that was kind of funny. It was kind of funny. I felt bad. It was kind of funny. Speaking of Jace Herondale, he walked so that Julian Blackthorne could run. I mean, I had a conversation once with a girl who read this series, and she was like, Julian Blackthorne. And I went, Julian Blackthorne. First of all, there are book boyfriends, and then there are book boyfriends. This man is so attractive. I have yet to see what he looks like in real life, but in the words, he is so attractive. He is an artist. He takes care of his entire family. He does pancakes for breakfast for the whole family. He's basically got like 5 kids. At one point he says to Emma, he says, I wish that they were our kids and that you and I were married. And I was like, I also wish that. I'm gonna read you a quote. Okay, are you ready? He caught her by the wrist, brought her hand to his bare chest, splayed her fingers over his heart. It beat against her palm like a fist punching its way through his sternum. Break my heart, he said. Break it in pieces. I give you permission. It's giving Maxon from The Selection. Break my heart, break it 1,000 times, America. It was only ever yours to break. I'm sorry. What? And this is like, this series is riddled with those kinds of statements. You need to read this book. You do need to read it. And by this book, I mean all 3 of these books. So go to the store, read this book. I need you to buy it. You can give them my name, Samantha. It won't give you a discount. They'll have no idea who I am, but they'll like let you buy it still for full price. That's been this episode of Books and Cats. Thank you for joining us and listening to me ramble about The Dark Artifices by Cassandra Clare. We'll have that listed below, as well as always. Please follow us on Books and Cats Official on Instagram. Subscribe. Comment the book that you want me to read next, and I will read it. I have only received 1 recommendation so far, and it was from my best friend for a book I've already read, that she has also already read, that she got me to read. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have fun.